It's the Undress Show. Yes, it's Wednesday night Undress, recorded in front of a semi-alive audience in Conroy's Emporium, where you can catch anything your heart desires. Hello, my fellow Undress. My name's Jeremy Taylor, and I'm here to host the talk show that pretends to care. We're getting hundreds of hits every day on the Undress website. That proves that folk who watch porn are a discriminating bunch. Our undressed but not entirely naked panel tonight, leading international consultant on interesting to some of the most interesting people in the world, Dr. Orlando.
Hey, hey.
The head mistress of Scary Intelligent, Kathleen Taylor, taking out from time from decorating the dungeons, the Dark Lord of Pheromones, Ivo Ivanov. Ivo. And joining the panel tonight of their own volition, our guest tonight, Donna Kane-Swan, acclaimed theatrical and film scholar connoisseur, and Mr. Kenneth Hayes, businessman, politician, and Darth Vader's answer to Donald Trump. So let's get on with the show. It's with as much unfettered unconscientiosis unfeeling in my intestinal nether regions.
I have an uneasy feeling about this.
Yes, that I approach the first subject, and what a subject, for the panel's lavatorial consideration. A self-conscious wife once asked her husband, "Honey," she was an American, "are my boobs too small?" "No, honey," he replied, "they're fine, but if you want to make them bigger, why don't you rub toilet paper between them?" And so, for the next couple of weeks, the wife rubbed toilet paper between her boobs several times a day, but saw no results. She finally asked him, "Honey, where did you get the idea that this toilet paper thing would work?" He replied, "Well, you've been rubbing toilet paper on your backside all these years, and that's getting bigger." My question is...
Jeremy.
Should have seen that one coming.
You should have seen that one coming. My question, lavatory paper, under or over?
And everybody knows exactly what you mean by that.
Hanging.
Yeah.
Fellow undressed.
Over, of course.
I find this to be an extremely important question. I find it to be as important almost as much as my wife does. In fact, the very first time that my wife, she wasn't my wife at the time, came to visit me at my house, she excused herself, went into the bathroom, and came out and gave me a stern rebuke because my toilet paper was hung under instead of over.
You are married.
I kept her anyway, yes.
Amazing.
You kept her anyway? I'm
Oh,
guessing
what a
that
statement.
you switched to over.
That's besides the point, Donna.
No, that is the point.
So, Kathleen, do you like your paper under or over?
Well,
You
I
like
can
it
see
hanging?
I can see the point in over because then you can find the end more easily. However,
That's what she said.
yeah, oh God, this is gonna go this way, isn't it?
Going downhill.
That's enough seriousness about toilet paper. Oh.
Mr. Hayes.
We have an under from the audience.
Mr. Ken.
Definitely over because I have pets and my dog loves to grab it. If one of my children puts the toilet paper upside down or under, my dog will grab the end of it and then take off across the house with it. So I have found toilet paper all the way out into the living room into the kitchen. Yeah,
What an excellent
she
dog.
finds it very entertaining. So we're an over household.
And of
Stringently
course,
over.
in the old days, the reason that you have the paper above, right, so over, is so that the maids knew that the toilet paper had been changed and that the lavatory, as is its proper name, had been serviced. And so in a hotel, you always see, a decent hotel, you always see the paper over the top, because that tells that the place has been serviced.
Yeah, but that only counts if you care whether or not they're cleaning your bathroom.
Yeah, he has a point.
Yeah, I mean, you don't want to know what's been on the floor
We're
in
taking
a
side
bathroom.
trips down gross alley here.
Or even
Yes.
side strips, yeah.
Never noticed that at the Motel 6s in my life.
No, I keep my shoes on in the Motel 6.
I'm
that
ashamed
shoes
to
in
even
bed.
know that you've been in Motel 6s.
I don't know.
Commonly referred to as the no-tell motel.
The No-Tell Motel. Ah, right. Okay, so on to our first light-hearted story, and get
That wasn't?
the panel giving some consideration. There's a petition recently to allow open-carry firearms at this summer's Republican National Convention is rapidly gaining signatures, or was on Monday, and attention. By Monday lunchtime, it had got to 42,000 signatures. The non-answer from Donald Trump was what he thought about it was, "I'm going to have to read the small print." The petition was calling on Republican presidential contenders, the National Rifle Association, Republican National Committee, and so on and so forth, to allow attendees to wear firearms. This, of course, was going to put the Republicans in the interesting position of tolerating the types of policies they often criticize. How can Republicans support open carry but not push for it to be allowed at their own convention? And then boringly, later on Monday, the Secret Service stepped in and said, nah, not happening. You're not having guns. So ticket or not, any unauthorized person with a gun will not be allowed into the event.
And immediately took all of the presidential contenders for the Republican nomination off the hook. Just like that. They were so relieved.
They were counting on that. I
Oh,
mean,
yeah.
The Secret Service and their wishes was showing up in articles long before anybody had to go on record as to how they felt about it.
Yeah.
So they were just counting on that.
I'm not quite sure why they didn't come out then in favor of having the open carry. It would have curried favor with the NRA.
Carried favor, did you say?
Yeah, carried
Curried.
favor.
Carried favor.
Yeah.
Ken, your views on this?
Well, yeah. I mean, if they knew that the security elements were going to intervene and keep it from occurring, they probably should have played it just the way you said.
Yeah,
Played it
and I'm
smart.
surprised
And,
Trump
and
said,
they
yeah,
did
be all
know.
for it.
I mean, it's not like the Secret Service
Right.
hasn't gone on record many times over this issue.
Exactly. And it's a standard security precaution. I mean, they're not going to change that.
Yeah, I'm a little, I don't know. I don't know if annoyed is the right topic for this. I understand that we want to have the Republicans boil in the bathwater they're making. Sorry for such a weird metaphor. Anyway,
We prefer cold baths.
know
Come
that-
back to the bathwater in a minute.
Yeah, we'll come back to the bathwater.
We're
But
talking
I
about guns
don't
at the
know.
moment, not drowning.
I don't know why we would even want there to be a real discussion about whether or not guns should be allowed at this thing. It's inherently dangerous. I mean,
I know, but
especially since Trump's going to be there.
Trump has made things very dangerous already. Why not simply go whole hog and say, yeah, we ought to have open
we're
carry?
better than that.
It might have been one step too far to make even his supporters think, this guy's nuts. Maybe that's why he didn't do it.
I think that there's a large group of people that know that Trump is nuts, even on the Republican side.
Oh, yeah, even among his supporters, they know he's nuts.
And I don't want to put everybody in danger just to make a ultimately pointless
well, luckily,
comment
what
on-
we wish here isn't going to,
But what is
where-
interesting is that
have
the
any difference.
Republicans are having to deal with dealing with their own
won't register
wishes.
at all. It won't make a difference at all.
Won't make a bit of difference.
Where is the funny in this topic?
The funny was... the funny was...
Bazinga!
Kasich rushing out and said, all that matters is what the Secret Service says. Thank God.
yeah.
Yes, well,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
The
But
governor
there's-
of the home state for the convention immediately defers to the federal government, which intervened again, and you didn't get your
Oh,
funnies.
darn those rotten
Yes.
civil service
See?
people. They won't let us have guns.
Won't let her have a gun.
Yeah.
So it happens.
But what about the right to protect themselves? You know, they're going to be sitting ducks, utterly helpless against evildoers, Democrats, criminals, and others who wish to threaten the American way of life.
Well, it would have made the protests against the convention by the left out front more entertaining, to say the least. It would have been an interesting confrontation.
So do you think then, Mr. Hayes, that, I mean, if Darth turns up there, you know, will he be allowed in? You are my son.
Well, Darth carries a lightsaber, so I'm not sure that's covered.
They may just have him remove the battery.
Probably, yes.
You probably
Our
just have to read the fine
lightsabers.
print.
I mean, I can see a Secret Service guy saying, you know, you can't... Whoom.
Just do you can always just use the force and do a chokehold. I mean, it's very simple.
Yes.
But yeah, it certainly was an interesting issue for them to have to deal with, which got removed.
I have an interesting devil's advocate question. Suppose the Secret Service didn't step in and guns were allowed and there was no problem. How much could that have bolstered the NRA's position?
Well, it's about the
Exactly.
same amount of probability of that as me winning the lottery, and I don't buy tickets.
I see. I'm not entirely sure that
I
that's the case.
disagree with that. Yeah,
I
'cause
think
they're-
that if you had I'm sorry. with the exception of Donald Trump, I think that there is a large contingent of responsible gun owners.
There are a large contingent, but there is an equally large contingent of very fringe personalities that follow
That are being
Donald
brought
Trump.
out in this election
and
specifically. No, I
in
agree.
this election specifically,
I
and we're
agree with
seeing
that.
violence that we really haven't seen like since the 1968 Democratic Convention.
Uh-huh.
I mean, people just being punched and all kinds of
Pepper
things happening.
sprayed,
And
latest
I
one.
just don't. On one level, yes, you want everybody to be safe, but I really kind of agree with Kat that the probability is remote, mainly because I just think there are too many fringe people out there with too short a trigger. Pardon the
Is
pun,
it true
but
that he keeps a derringer in his hair?
there's room?
Probably enough
I
hairspray
heard
to hold it up.
that he can lift it and there's a pop-up.
Did anybody read the comics this week? I think it was Woo Moo. It was either Woo Moo or Non Sequitur. Had little aliens watching a monitor, going, our brethren that we sent down has really infiltrated the U.S. system. And what you see is they all look like his toupee. All the little aliens look like his toupee.
Okay, and as we wind up this thing and we mentioned toupee, I want to know, what were they called on Star Trek?
Tribbles.
Tribbles. Mr. Hayes had
Yes.
it first. Yes, Tribbles is what they were called. You're listening to Wednesday Night Undressed.com, recorded partially alive at Conroy's Pub and Emporium in Lawrence, Kansas. Wednesday Night Undressed.com. The next one for the Undressed tonight. What comes first, religion or country?
Well, country is alphabetically first. Sorry, go ahead.
You practiced that, hadn't you? You had, hadn't you? You are naughty. What comes first, religion or country? An American Jew or a Christian American? Perhaps an American Muslim?
You asking who comes first, American Jew or a Christian
Yeah,
American?
I want to know who comes first.
That is completely
That's an
inappropriate.
question.
What comes first, your religious identity or your...
A gentleman. Perhaps a
Your
Catholic
nationality.
who happens to live in America. Does your country come first or your religion? Monitoring of Muslim groups is being suggested by presidential candidates. Yet, as an immigrant myself, and of course Emo, he's one too, slightly different one, because he comes from we both come from a place beginning with B. Bulgaria and Britain.
But you also come from a place called
But are they
Bullshit.
really that?
Yes, true.
Oh, God.
And I
you've
would like
got
to refer to the First Amendment. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof or abridging the freedom of speech or the press or the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. So what comes first? Is it religion or country?
I looked for some studies dealing with this. I found one from ages ago that was a study about something fairly specific. It was about Caucasian American students
beg your
and
pardon?
African American students, and which came
She's
first
talking
there.
about black people. Hush.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Results indicated African Americans identified more with their race and religion than did Caucasian American students. A Caucasian American tended to identify with country first. I think it's what is more important to you in a certain happenstance.
This is a subject that actually has a long history in this country, and one of the reasons why the First Amendment was written, because those men were British at
Don't
the
be
time.
blaming the
And
Brits.
I'm not blaming them. I'm
sorry,
absolutely
let
not.
me blame
And
them.
So much fun to
Goddamn
blame the
Brits.
When this all goes to hell in
my
November,
point
you're going to
was that-
want the help from the Queen.
Hang on. But my point is that country, the idea of country was so new to them that many of them identified themselves first as their religion, which was very unified in the beginning of the history of this country, very unified. And it isn't until time goes on that we start getting more and more religions. Then we have, once the Civil War comes, we have that same question again. Country, what am I identifying with? I think this is a question that the way you're asking it can only be answered today in terms of country or religion, because now we are solidly American.
Ken.
I have a little different view as far as what the founding or the First Amendment was all about, and I think they were definitely shooting for a clear division between church and state.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
And for me personally, it's always been country first and religion second. Okay.
I have a question.
Yes.
What do you mean when you say division between country
and state?
Between church and state, thank you, yeah.
Meaning that there was no official religion of the government.
Yeah, get a little closer to your mic.
There was no official religion of the government.
I need to put an addendum on that. One of the reasons why they wanted such a strong division between church and state is because most of our early settlers were running from unified countries, country/religion.
Sure.
You were one thing in France. You were one thing in England. You were one thing in Germany. And many of them were fleeing that. The Huguenots fled
To
that.
various degrees, yes.
The Puritans fled that.
But England was definitely that way because it was the Church of England, which had gone to extreme levels to throw the Catholics out.
Those
which was settled
goddamn
in Maryland,
Brits.
for instance.
Yes. Oh,
Maryland
yeah.
was a Catholic state,
Yeah.
for instance. But the point being is that they knew that this would be an issue, and they did not want to have one religion for the United States.
I absolutely agree.
So I agree with you. I agree, and I have a slightly more philosophical outlook on the question. You can't be whatever religion you want to be in other countries. This is
Correct.
the country that allows you the freedom of choice.
Yes.
So for Americans, whether or not, the problem is, I also agree with Kath. I think that it is a very personal question for the person that you're asking it to, but depending on who you're asking the question to, there needs to be that understanding that whether or not you agree to identify yourself primarily by the country or by the religion, this is the place that you are allowed to do that. So in the way that I think, that means that we are technically country first, because without that, we don't have the freedom to choose what our religion is.
Evo.
Agreed.
Well, I was just wondering. You said it that we should get a little more philosophical about it. I was thinking that there was a time that mankind was dominated by religion when there was no countries. There were barely any countries in Europe until like 1,000 years ago, and but religion always existed, and superstitions, and little by little, I see the separation of state and church as a sign of social evolution.
Absolutely.
We're evolving,
Agreed.
and right now we look around at the most successful societies, and those are societies that are secular. Like Turkey is very successful. Unfortunately, they're being dragged back right now.
They've been dragged,
and then-
for the past 10 years, they're being dragged back.
And then you see, or Japan, or us. We are successful societies, economically successful and more enlightened, and
We have porn.
we have porn, of course. That's a religion on its own. But but
you seen? No.
but I was thinking about countries that currently, even though they're countries, they're really not countries. They are a religion.
Yeah.
Like Saudi Arabia, it's a Wahhabi religion. Is
Don't you
what this
put that on sushi?
Yeah, that's what you get from sushi. It's the green stuff you put on sushi.
Oh, and if you do this and porn at the same time, it's absolutely
But you
incredible.
brought up an interesting point in the fact that, and it exists in this country too, the stronger the religious identity,
Yes.
the more you're going to identify first religion,
And-
second
and second
country,
country.
and you'll find you'd find that with Hasidic Jews, and there are plenty of other examples as well.
But this is shifting, and I think our country now is more of a country than religion. And at sporting events, we sing the national anthem, and we don't sing a religious psalm
Yeah.
or anthem. We become more and more we identify ourselves more and more with our country than our religion.
And quite frankly, when you have people, especially immigrants, the more you include them into the country, the less they'll identify with religion and the more they'll identify with country. And we're kind of seeing that in Europe, where people are not being included. They're being left in these isolated communities, and so they continue to identify more with their religion than their country.
I love the place where you took this conversation. I love it because this is a very interesting dichotomy because we don't have Muslim ghettos in the United States. But you go to Europe, any Western European country, and these Muslim communities exist and they self-segregate.
Yeah.
And they exist in their own kind of artificial
I don't
world.
think they
and
intended to self-segregate in the beginning. I think they found circumstances such that
Yes,
that's where they ended
they
up.
live in poverty. They have limited opportunities. They're not integrated, and maybe that's how
But are
they
we
organically
in
drift.
danger of revisiting Germany 1936,
I think absolutely.
1937, and this is a speciality of Ken's. Is,
I think so.
Kristallnacht
Really?
and that sort of thing.
Yeah. Well, I think there's two sides to that as to whether they choose to be in these areas and segregate themselves, or whether they are forced to by the governments or by the people in the countries that they have immigrated to.
Yeah.
Now, whether that's a choice or whether it's just the economic
Economic
social
circumstance,
factors that
Yeah.
drive that.
Yeah.
So I think that cases can be made for both sides. It
Yeah.
depends on each nation, and they're different.
Yeah.
So, in the case of, for instance, France banning the public wearing of a hijab, is that a move in the right direction to avoid that problem, or is it? And I am not smart enough to have an informed opinion.
And
Is
you should
that
be clear that they banned all religious
Yes, I was going to
symbols.
say, au contraire,
Right.
they haven't banned that. What they've banned is, as
Burqa.
Donna says, religious. So you
I
are
need
going to
this
get
information.
You are going to get. You are
I-
going to get into big trouble if you wear one of those sort of like wooden crosses that teenagers.
And I couldn't walk in wearing this.
They probably
We
wouldn't do
couldn't see that
anything.
on the
They
radio.
wouldn't. But what
It's
what
the
they
Hebrew
say
symbol
is
for life.
overt. That's what they're really concerned about.
And
Symbol.
so? Then
letters.
again, is this a fix for the problem that we see of that religious seclusion that we're talking about, or does this exacerbate the problem?
I think they're trying to treat a symptom. They're
Gotcha.
not treating the disease or the issue directly, is my opinion.
So then, is that ban on overt religious displays harmful, in your opinion?
I think it makes some of them feel very repressed, especially in the Muslim communities.
Gotcha.
Definitely. Because they feel attacked by that.
And how about, you ban the hijab, and then you have to ban the worship of all godlike entities, so you have to ban the Hasselhoff.
And Trump. Don't
David
forget
Hasselhoff.
Trump.
Yes.
The cough.
It's very interesting.
And that would be a major
growing
problem
up,
in Germany.
For me, growing up in the United Kingdom, Kathleen has spent a lot of time in the United Kingdom. Ken has spent a lot of time in the United Kingdom.
I'm so sorry.
It's very interesting where you do have Muslim communities in towns like Luton, for example, north of London, where the police have come to the conclusion that it's easier to allow local Sharia law,
Oh, no.
as long as it complies with British law. It's just easier to get it done.
See, easier is not the answer.
Yeah,
Right.
right.
Yeah.
But they're not going to allow the mullahs or whoever it would be to chop off hands.
I think
But they
though, if you
are
look at-
allowed to.
But we've
Repress
had that.
women.
We've had that here, though. I mean, if you go back 150 years, like central Pennsylvania, all the law books are in Old Dutch.
Yeah.
Right. But if you look at those particular situations, you say they allow them. They
Or Old
chose to
German, sorry.
do
Yeah, because
that.
in
And we've already had a few
Pennsylvania Dutch,
communities
just
here in the
correct.
United
Sorry.
States where
I misconstrued the terms.
Muslim communities have tried to declare that they want to use Sharia law.
Yeah, and you're
They're doing
right.
it on their own.
So, how do we feel about the tragedy in Brussels last week? And then over the weekend, riot police having to control the square where all the flowers are, when not neo-Nazis, but far right people decided we've had enough of this and we're going to march on the square. And they all dressed up in black and marched on the square
Yeah.
and trampled all over the flowers and saying, we don't want these people here, we want them to leave.
Yeah.
Well, I
And it's
actually-
not anything deep. This isn't deep. This is simple. Please
Right.
go away.
Yeah,
Go away.
And I've been talking to you guys a lot, actually, many times about the fact that this is becoming very reminiscent to me of the 1930s in Europe, the rise of nationalism, and Jewish ghettos.
Yeah. And now we have come over Hitler here in the United States.
Sadly,
And we have
that's,
to deal with
that's
that
all too
idiot.
close.
Yeah.
But again,
I think you
if
might be
you look
giving
at-
Trump a little too much credit there.
If you look at some of this stuff, you'll notice that they very astutely ignore the Trump campaign anyway, ignores these issues completely. If Trump's asked a question about it, he sidesteps it. If very well briefed, actually, and so even though we've seen his campaign manager arrested, literally arrested, he did
You
turn
mean
himself
as opposed
in.
to figuratively arrested?
No, he turned himself in and was arrested.
Well, his development is a little bit arrested, so that's a figure of speech. So yeah,
He wasn't able to be hired by any other campaigns. But there we are. You're listening to WednesdayNightUndressed.com, recorded partially alive at Conroy's Pub and Emporium in Lawrence, Kansas. Wednesday Night Undressed.
Partially alive? Does that mean we're also partially dead?
It could be. I mean,
I've got this
depends how old
toenail
you are.
on me.
Next story, and I think this is a very sad story. It's somewhat telling, and I'm going to be very interested in what Dr. Orlando has to say on this. And I want to preface this story by saying that Dr. Orlando was brought up in East St. Louis. The New York Police
And he's
Department.
sympathizing with us over the UK.
The New York Police Department has investigated alleged disorderly conduct after the controversial arrest of a postal worker whilst delivering packages on his route. This is only being talked about by one major media outlet, CBS, and I want to know what the panel would like to have happen if they had oversight on the NYPD. And if you haven't heard the story, effectively we have a black postal worker in a postal uniform standing next to his little van waiting to cross the road. The van is double parked. He wants to get across the road. An unmarked police car carrying 4 detectives
Not in uniform.
in civvies goes past him so close they actually brush against him. He does what most New Yorkers do and F's and blinds at the car, not knowing it's a police car. It stops, reverses up. The rest of this is all recorded. It's recorded by somebody who says this is really bad news. It shouldn't be happening. What the police officers didn't know was that the guy doing the recording is a retired police captain. I have been unable until this morning to actually, and this is 4 days, to actually research this story anymore. I discovered, however, this morning that the NYPD Police Commissioner, William Bratton, has said he's very concerned with the performance of the officers. Internal Affairs
Understatement
is
of the year.
investigating the thing. Please note that the 4 officers are still on duty.
Not as detectives right now, but still
Not
on
as
duty.
true, not as detectives. I'm just interested to know. The police have a difficult enough time, and I imagine in New York, it's not much fun being a police officer. And by the way, there are 1,000 police officers in New York who are Muslim. But if we, the panel, were an oversight committee on the NYPD, what would we be thinking? What would we were saying? Why aren't we reading about this in the newspaper? What sort of things would we be doing if we were on, like being on a board of a non-profit? What would we be wanting to have happen? Let's start, if I can, with Dr. Orlando.
Sure. And I feel that it is incredibly important to point out to everyone here that Jeremy pointed out that I am from East St. Louis, specifically to point out that I am not from New York City.
You're listening.
There is this notion, I think, that this is a problem that these 4 officers have and only these 4 officers have, and that there's something that the New York Commission or the New York Commissioner or any other entity could do that would somehow alleviate this problem. This problem is a problem of unchecked power. And that's not to denigrate the jobs that cops have to do. It's not to not be sympathetic to the job that they have to do. The truth of the matter is, cops are an authority figure, and part of the responsibility of policemen, all policemen, is to make sure that is not abused.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we have plenty, myriad, innumerable examples of that not happening. Anything from literal court cases that are going on to the notion, this idea that we have of the thin blue line, to the presentation that we have in movies and TV shows that cops have to do the wrong thing in order to get the right guy. All of these things are symptoms to this bigger problem that the authority that we invest in some policemen is not wisely invested, and that there's a community of policemen that are not willing to stand up and fight that. The fact that the person that recorded this happens to be a retired police officer is illuminating to the case, but it is absolutely not the norm. And I think everybody here can recognize that. So for me, the story is not quite so much about what the New York commissioner can do. It is, can we possibly use this as an opportunity to have a realistic conversation about the problems of abuse of authority of people in power? And that doesn't just limit himself to the police, but we invest a certain amount of trust in the people that we ask to represent us or protect us, and we need to be able to trust them.
Ken Hayes.
Well, I think it's interesting because the only job I think would be worse than being a cop in New York is being a postal worker in New York. So I find it interesting that the two parties are at odds with each other. Yeah. The fact that these four obviously way overreacted to the entire situation, and then, of course, karma got even with them when they had an accident with their guy in the car with them after they arrested him.
Because I missed that bit. Karma.
Yeah, karma got him because the officer that was driving was turning around and chewing the guy out and actually rear-ended another car, so they actually created another traffic violation there.
And they hadn't bothered to strap the guy in, which is, and he went over the seat and banged his head against the
and
seat.
federal offense is leaving a postal truck unattended.
Yeah.
Oh. And you're also interfering with the federal...
Plus the packages were left on the ground. I don't know if anyone caught that. But.
And you're interfering with a federal employee in the commission of their duties. So there's a whole list of issues.
I think they should deport all four of those guys.
Let's go back to the question, if I can, panel.
Yes.
Let me drag you back to, let's imagine that you are on one of these oversight panels and there's hundreds of them in all the big cities. The police have
they should be suspended immediately. And then either terminated or a deep investigation of this particular situation needs to occur. But you're and in congruence with that, they obviously need to start looking at the mentality of the officers and what kind of culture that exists there.
So I'm sorry if anybody else had anything to say. I'm going to now argue the other side of this. This is why this case is so interesting to me. I don't think there's anybody here that would say you should be able to yell at a policeman just because he does something wrong.
Yeah, but those guys were in.
But if you don't know their police,
why shouldn't you be able to yell at a policeman?
Whoa! And being from that area, both New York and the surrounding area, people yell at police all the time.
Is
that
appropriate?
Please note, they.
No, I don't want to talk about the whole racial. Please don't go there.
No, hang on. No, I wasn't getting it. What I was saying was they were in a Crown Vic, but it was probably a green or red
not
one
identified
or
as police officers,
and they weren't. They didn't. It didn't have a blue light on top.
But
of
that was this case.
The very moment that they identified themselves as the police officers, isn't it that postal employees' responsibility to say, "I'm backing the fuck off"?
Yeah.
And that
it is not. They are human beings. If they did something wrong, they can get yelled at.
They can.
That's not an arrestable offense.
But there is also the reasonable human understanding that if you antagonize somebody that has authority over you, that might cause you to have.
Then they better learn some self-control.
What's very important here is that Eric Adams, who is the ex-police captain, who was filming this on his phone, makes the point that the man Grays was not resisting. He did exactly what you suggested. He realized that the way to stay alive was to put his hands up and stand still. And it was the police officers who were saying, stop resisting. And he says, I'm not resisting. And Adams has said, the ex-police captain has said, if he did resist, he'd probably be dead today.
Yeah.
And I should clarify when I say that, people are yelling at the police, it's not always negative. It's just kind of a...
You mean like, hey, good job?
Well, it's kind of a culture of this is
swing
an
that baton again.
Loud place, and we talk back to everyone. We talk back to everyone, whether it's the guy...
That's just not fair.
Well, isn't there... there's obviously a problem. There's obviously a problem with etiquette and the way police are communicating with the public, isn't there like a script that they have to follow in certain situations in terms of losing appropriate tone and language? I'm sure that part of their education involves, being taught how to react, how to act in these situations. So I wonder if there's something that they're not following something.
I would think that is probably the case, but I would also think that there's probably not a big enough rule book to include every possible situation up to and including accidentally hitting the post office guy with your car.
Brilliant idea. Brilliant idea just came to me as you started talking. I have a solution to the problem. Every police officer should be required to speak in British accent. There's something
old boy.
I'm something weirdly de-escalating, and
But
brings
then we would
instant,
assume they were unarmed and we would just run over them.
No, I mean it brings instant sophistication to any kind of conflict situation. For example, say, "Shut up and put your hands up, motherfucker." Say it. Say it.
With
Come
your
on.
British accent.
Shut up and arise your hands, you
See what I'm saying? How do you react? How do you get mad at this? I mean, say you have the right to remain silent, motherfucker.
But you have to say it with the Bulgarian accent mixed in.
No,
with
no,
your-
Yeah.
no, that's escalating. We won't
makes
Out
it
of
more
interest,
special.
well, out of interest, although we know that these police officers were in plain clothes, what would have happened in Sofia if that had happened? What would you? Would you even consider?
Okay, you have to
opening-
understand, first of all, that Ivo is a celebrity. So there would be absolutely no chance of any policeman having anything other
No,
than
I mean, all right.
Mr.
What I'm getting at
Ivanov.
is, what
Can I
would happen
please
if
shake
you
your
messed with plainclothes
Not true. No.
plainclothes police officers in somewhere like Sofia?
Well, surprisingly, we don't have these kind of problems, mostly because the police is so corrupted that basically you wiggle out of any situation by giving them a $20 bill.
Right.
And
And they accept, just so anybody's listening, just so you know, in the car or wherever, if you go to Bulgaria or come to that anywhere in Europe, right, with the exception of France,
Nobody
a
goes
few
to France.
a few dollars and you're right.
East Europe, everybody, all the cops are
That's
corrupted.
the way it was in Turkey as well.
Yeah, they go out on the street to.
They would purposely stop you because
They'll stop you without you breaking the rules, and you just give them, $5, and you're on your way. And in fact, there was a very funny situation. I had a friend of mine who relocated to the United States, right here in Lawrence, Kansas, and coming from East Europe, he never stopped drinking and driving, so he was.
Do I know this friend? Just curious.
Yes.
Okay. Just making
So
sure.
he was completely wasted, drank industrial amounts of cheap alcohol, and then
Oh, yes.
ended
I
up
know this friend.
ended up falling asleep at a traffic light on a red light, and it was 1 a.m. but still he fell asleep on 9th Street and Emery Road, and just he was sleeping, and the car was running on a red light, and the cops came and arrested him, and then he was telling this story to a bunch of friends of mine in Bulgaria, and they said, "You got arrested for that?" They were in complete shock. And he goes, "Yeah." And they're like, "Here, if you give them $10, they'll pull out a blanket and tuck you in." And it's not far from the truth.
My story is not nearly as funny, but when I first moved here to Lawrence and I got stopped for something, and I don't remember what it was, and I immediately started arguing. It was just de facto.
You, Donna?
F you.
I can't believe that. Can you believe that, Lewis?
Hold on.
However,
I'm trying to
my friend
suspend
in the-
disbelief.
Yeah.
Stop. However, my friend in the car said, "You are not in New York anymore. Kansas police are different."
Yeah.
And I immediately started with, "I'm sorry, you're right," and I changed my attitude for the circumstances.
The only times I've been able to wiggle out of a ticket here is when I actually admit immediately. In Kansas, I immediately admit my guilt. And the funniest one was I went into a street without stopping at a stop sign, immediately got pulled over. The cop came and said, "Sir, do you know that you didn't stop at a stop sign?" And I looked at him and I said, "Well, that makes me an idiot." And he said, "No ticket." He just gave me a
I
warning
usually
just for that.
show some cleavage, and I'm good from
Yeah,
there.
well, yeah.
That's what Kathleen does. Yeah, every time. Works every time. So I'm just interested in watching this story and seeing how it goes, because it's not a national story. You'd expect the liberal media, the Rachel Maddow's of this world, to be all over it, but all week, no, they haven't. You're listening to Wednesday Night Undressed.com, recorded partially alive at Conroy's Pub and Emporium in Lawrence, Kansas. Wednesday Night Undressed.com. So, our next subject, which I wanted to talk about, is films and theatre. Let's go to films and theatre if I can. Millions and millions and millions of dollars are spent on publicity and product placement across the world when a new film comes out. The new Batman against Superman film is being panned here in Europe, here in the US, I beg your pardon, but I understand is actually being thought slightly better of in Europe. However, although it's being panned, US box office of last weekend, it took in $166 million. So what defines a good film or theatre show? Just cause lovies and critics say it is or it is not good, are they right? A page-turner like a Harry Potter or a musical from Lloyd Webber? Or is it perhaps a Sundance movie made on a small budget or a small black box off Broadway production that no one understands unless they have a degree in something unpronounceable? And I want to start with Donna.
Well, actually, I do have many degrees in things that are easily pronounceable. But first of all, I just want to use one of those degrees to just clarify something, because you said critics. And what we are reading in the Sunday supplement is not criticism. Criticism the term criticism is actually the second definition that you'll find in the dictionary, and it means a thorough and deep analysis of what it is you're watching. It does not mean to criticize, to find what is wrong. What we're listening to is reviewers who are paid to tell you a little bit about the movie or the theater piece, a little bit about the actors, a little bit about the story, and then whether it's worth your $10.
Yeah.
And having said that, to borrow an old phrase, beauty is in the eye of the beholder.
Yeah.
And I quite frankly believe that any intelligent person should look at a reviewer and go, well, that was interesting. Now let me find out for myself. And I'd hope you do that with any piece of art or theater or music. Or a movie.
That being said, there are some works of art that are universally accepted, and they're both commercial success and critical success. And I'm sure we can all agree, like stuff like Apocalypse Now or The Godfather.
What's that?
So,
Is that to do with zombies?
yes, anything with zombies. And so, yeah, you're right. When you read the paper, it's a review. It's not necessarily a criticism.
Okay, I slightly disagree. I am being humble in my disagreement because you're smarter than me.
It's about time you noticed that.
When the reviewer tells you whether or not the movie is worth your time, isn't that a critique of the movie?
No, it's just a review.
I don't understand what the difference is.
Because you're using the word critique as in its first meaning of the word, to be critical, to point out
I'm actually
flaws
talking about
and
an analysis of the relative merit or
a
worth.
deep and thorough analysis using theory to back up your opinions is going to be a journal-length article. It's going to be a book. It's not going to be 500 words in a newspaper.
Well, but that's a formal critique. I would submit that you
Formal
can also,
criticism. Please, you just take the word critique out of it, because I think even the word critique has a negative connotation.
So my job here is to slice this down a bit. Kathleen, I know, has a phobia almost about anything Lloyd Webber has ever done.
Yeah.
And she wants
Who
to
doesn't?
throw up.
Yeah.
Why? He's one of the most successful...
He needs to be stopped.
I think he puts something in that fog that comes out in every production and washes over the audience. There's something in there that hypnotizes them or something. I don't know.
It is interesting, because I also am not an Andrew Lloyd Webber fan. We've talked about it before. And not because I don't recognize that he hits the masses in a big way. He does. You are right. Whatever it is that he's got, he does it.
Bit like us, really, isn't it, Lois?
Yeah, my difficulty is, he writes musical theater. And the musical part of it, I defy anyone to be able to pick out any one of the songs from, say, Phantom of the Opera, and then pick out a second song, because it's all the same song,
right.
going over and over and over again.
Yeah, I generally am not a big fan of people that are formulaic, that find a formula, especially in art. In business it's wonderful, but in art you want to be unpredictable. You want to surprise people. For example, a lot of people say Stephen King has a formula. Well, he doesn't. He changes constantly. In fact,
Oh, yeah.
I think he's a genius, and one day, years from now, people will realize it because he's unpredictable and changes the formula and goes in unexpected directions so often. And so Andrew Lloyd Webber has a formula, and he sticks to the formula.
Has anybody seen the movie?
Which
Here?
one?
No.
You think
Batman
is
and
that
Superman?
relevant?
No, I haven't.
I just was curious.
I've seen the trailer,
as
and
the
that's
word
Jeremy
enough.
sort of expanded the question when he
Sure.
said, what makes a good movie?
It looks like fun.
But
Yeah.
it's just interesting to take, particularly this one getting panned,
gosh, no, I
and
love
then
those movies.
seeing the movie, and just see is the negative hoorah about it legitimate?
Well, but-
and after seeing the movie, I think it is. Now, for my 10-year-old son, he thought it was great.
Mm-hmm.
It appealed to him because it was a lot of explosions, it was a lot of stuff, it was a lot of action, it was a lot of eyewash.
And you didn't like that?
I like it, but as far as having any kind of story,
Oh, Ken loves tanks.
I
was
wonder
very-
if-
Oh, he's
Well,
terrible.
and I
You give
do
him a
think-
tank, he's anybody.
I do think, though, you need to, not having seen the movie, I also know that when you're doing essentially an origin story, which is this is going to be for the Justice League, they're
The story of the group,
slowly,
yeah.
introducing each one of these characters. It is hard for a director to do that
Sure.
type of story because you get bogged down in all these details that you've got to get out there
You
so
can.
that they understand that, oh, this is going to play out in movie number 3 down the line.
But
Yeah.
but if you go along the with the other genre as far as Iron Man, the other
big company.
the other
Marvel,
big company,
yeah.
Marvel Comics, they didn't get bogged down in the drama or in the details so much of it. You got it; it was there, but they kept it moving.
I wonder if the question had to do with cinema as art or just a form of entertainment, because there are great movies that are just pure entertainment, but to me,
Right.
a really great movie. You mentioned great movie in your question. Great movie, to me, is a piece of art. Something that lingers, stays with you, somehow subliminally becomes part of your mentality.
It's grown
and
up.
and shapes,
It's got to be grown up.
and even shapes your
Why does
personality.
it have to be grown
Donna,
up?
Evo, have
Yeah.
you guys written? Have you guys
explain in a
read
minute.
Tolstoy's What Is Art?
Yeah.
No, I haven't.
Okay.
Who's Tolstoy?
He's this
This
art
minor
author
Russian.
guy. Yeah, he's not a big deal. Don't worry about it. He basically
That
says
is
in
my
there-
point. In some ways, I don't really care who Tolstoy is
No. The reason I bring him up is not because
compared
I
to
like
J.K.
him.
Rowling, who sold more books.
No. I agree. The only reason I asked the question is because basically it's a shorthand for the folks that have read it. His notion of art, he defined it as something that communicates emotion, and he specifically says that we concentrate too much on aesthetics. That aesthetics ultimately corrupt art. That anything can be defined as art as long as it makes the viewer feel something.
I love this. For example, Guernica. I don't know. It's
Where?
Guernica, the famous painting by Picasso,
Oh.
is a stunning piece of art. If you actually stand in front of the mural in Madrid and you see this piece of art, it will mess you up emotionally. You have to be inhuman to resist this piece of art, and you feel despair, fear, panic, chaos, everything when you look at it. If you look at it now on a computer, it's not going to do the same for you. But then you realize, even if you don't know the story of the city of Guernica and the destruction that took place there, if you just look at it, stay in front of it, you will understand. You understand that it's about the darkest place where a human condition can go. And it's really, and it's a piece of art. And you mentioned aesthetics. Where's the aesthetics? It's irregular shapes. It's one-dimensional. There's no realistic figures in it. It's Picasso, but it's freaking stunning. And I agree with you that sometimes art is what stirs you up emotionally. Yeah.
Of course, this ends up being a larger discussion
Conversation.
because you bring up, that it should stir emotion, and plenty of the classic Plato, Aristotle would go off in a completely different direction about that. It is a non-ending argument. Each generation, which used to be once upon a time in centuries, criticism, a type of criticism stayed for neoclassical criticism, romantic criticism. They stayed around for centuries. Now we move from one type to another so quickly. And it is a never-ending debate
Yeah.
whether, what it is we see, what is in the eye, and what does it stir in you.
Yeah, good point.
And that's the whole basis of deconstruction, which is
Yes.
that no two people can possibly hear a word, see a picture, feel an emotion in the same way, because each person brings their life, their memories,
Yeah.
their emotions, their psyche to just a simple word. I say red, you say red,
Yeah.
and my images of red are completely different than yours.
Yeah.
It was
It's
recently
go on and
discovered,
on.
I have to say, as we draw this part to its conclusion, that the bed, or Shakespeare, there's been a rumor for a very long time that he is missing his head. And in fact, it
Probably
was
since before he
confirmed.
started writing.
It was confirmed, yeah.
Confirmed recently that
Really?
his head is in fact missing
Yeah.
from his body. They've used ground penetrating radar, of course, initially here at KU. They've discovered that. I wonder whether or not, when they put Andrew Lloyd Webber in the ground, a few hundred years later, maybe his head will be taken.
It's taken
Well, you know,
right
guys,
now.
he's doing a brand new show on Broadway right now called School of Rock, and maybe it's a very different type of storyline for him. So maybe you will see some break from his model.
Formula, yeah.
You're listening to Wednesday Night Undressed.com, recorded partially live at Conroy's Pub and Emporium in Lawrence, Kansas. Wednesday Night Undressed.com. If you've been listening to our podcast over the last few weeks and last episodes, you will notice that we've been touching quite a lot on the FBI hacking issue. And very recently, the FBI have in fact managed to hack their way into the phone that was used by the people who did the shooting, and we are able to actually say in the San Bernardino shooting that we now know where. It isn't today, at the time of recording, nationally known, but we can tell you here on Wednesday Night Undressed that in fact an Israeli firm has been helping the FBI.
Of course.
Israeli company helped the FBI on unlocking the iPhone used by the one at San Bernardino, California shooters. Israel's Celebrite is a provider of mobile forensic software that says it does business with thousands of law enforcement, and they came to the conclusion that they should be helping the FBI, and so they did. My thought, though, was that I went and bought myself a cell phone the other day. Lots of people, including my children and my wife and my friends, have all said, Taylor, you ought to go and get yourself a new phone. Yours is 7 years old. The girl, in fact, said to me I said, am I due an upgrade? She said, you are so due.
Did it have a crank
My
handle
question,
on the side
yes. In fact, I couldn't
Sick.
get one of those. I wanted one with a handle, but they wouldn't give me one. My point is this. As they worked their way through my phone in changing the phones over, they kept asking for passwords. Numeric passwords, alphanumeric passwords. And I, this morning, counted, in fact, I got bored at 36 different passwords in my life. And I'm beginning to wonder, what is it about passwords? How do we deal with these passwords? And we have, people who are really good at tech. Dr. Orlando, that's why he's
Are you
called
saying that
Dr.
'cause I'm
Orlando.
black?
We have producers sitting at the other end here. How is a person supposed to be able to deal with so many different passwords, and you cannot have the same one? That's my question.
Ken gave us the secret. In fact, he told us his password for everything earlier. And I'm going to share it here. Okay? He says just
Write
use
this
the
down
word
at home.
password or password one.
That's one of the most popular, right?
Yeah.
Usually it's 1,
so
2,
now
3,
we know.
4.
I'm sorry, your life is over.
That's all right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to be selling it to your daughter tomorrow.
I'll be very bored when nothing
There's
really
a
changes for
publication
me,
that comes every
unfortunately.
year identifying the most popular passwords of the year, and password is always one among
Password
the first
and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7
Yeah.
are usually the most popular.
But how do you guys do it? I mean, how do you deal with passwords?
Superior intellect, Jeremy.
I
Well-
thought that was already established that I
No,
was
I
the
feel
one who
bad.
had the superior intellect.
I'm
Is that
really-
because I'm white and English?
Well, the English thing for sure. No.
For sure?
No,
I'm taller
seriously.
than you. Don't you be
Only
calling me
standing up.
short.
The The short answer is we use password managers. There is a comic that I will put on the website it's by a comic strip team called XKCD, where they talk about password security.
Sounds like a good password, XKCD.
Well, it close. But the point that they make in the comic is that we are taught, as human beings, we're taught bad password management strategy. We're taught to use these things like alphanumeric codes with special characters embedded in them, which are terribly difficult for humans to memorize. And at the point where kids were cracking passwords by looking at a list of possible passwords to use, and that was the extent of it, that kind of made sense. We wanted passwords that were difficult for humans to guess upon. But I'm guessing, 30 years ago, we moved past that. We have computers that are cracking passwords, and the passwords that we create right now are almost trivially easy for a computer to crack.
Well, isn't everything moving towards touch screens and biometrics? I mean, aren't we very close to a place where we will be identified by our iris or fingertip?
It already is that way. You can get cell phones where it identifies you by your eye or your thumb.
Yeah.
Oh, that one does. That one does. This one
doesn't.
Okay.
What really worries me is that after the iPhone got cracked, seemingly impenetrable, the last thing that remains on Earth that is not hackable is Gary Busey's mind.
Well,
that would be a lot of fun to get into, wouldn't it?
I'm going to submit that there is nothing on this earth that is impenetrable, including Gary
Busey's mind. I don't know if we can.
No, seriously.
Nobody wants to hack in that.
Seriously, there's no such thing as an impenetrable lock.
Yeah.
No.
You know, I always want to take this back to the analogy of your own home's security. Mm-hmm. You cannot find a lock that nobody can break. The best you can do is find a lock that is strong enough to get most of the not 100% determined people to not break into your house.
Right. Mm-hmm.
That's the best that you can hope for.
Deterrence.
It's the best that Apple can hope for. It's
like
the best.
owning a dog.
Exactly. It is just what should be the final level of deterrent for someone getting into your house.
Right.
Just like the security on the iPhone should be the final level of deterrent for having someone intercept the data that's on your phone.
And best thing is to really have nothing valuable in your home.
No shit. If you don't want your shit getting stolen,
drive a
don't
crappy
buy
car.
expensive
And
shit.
also
I just got crap in my house.
export all of your porn into the cloud. So
That's not where your porn lives. Let me talk to you after this little.
Porn in the cloud is a great name for a rock band.
Yeah.
Porn in the cloud.
And if it was on your computer and you think you erased it, you really didn't.
You
It's still there.
really didn't. I will make it my job to find your porn.
Yes.
No, sorry, that's a different job altogether. So seriously, the way that the tech savvy do it is a password manager. I have conservatively triple the number of passwords that you just mentioned. I probably know 2. I use a password manager. It tells me what my password is for this site, that site, the other site. I keep it on my phone and on my tablet. I keep my phone and my tablet locked as a result because I don't want Evo walking. Have you ever noticed how sketchy Evo looks? Anyway, I don't want Evo walking off with my tablet. So
Yeah.
Particularly when he comes back from Bulgaria.
Exactly.
I looked at one. I saw one called Dashline. Are the sort of favorite ones that people use?
Everybody has their favorite. I came across LastPass as the first one that I really investigated and liked, and it serves me well. So I've been using it for the better part of a decade.
That's certainly something I need to look into because I use my memory and what I enjoy reading or classics names, and then I associate numbers with it. So I'll put together a name or a number or some sort of something
a mnemonic of some kind.
The way my memory works, especially with my degrees in history, I can pick out a lot of obtuse dates and names that go together that not everybody's going to associate with me or with anything.
Yeah, and
I use that system, but it's all,
And
You'll
doesn't
find
matter.
as you get older, though, it's more and more difficult to remember
Which
things.
goes with which?
Well, that's not even
the
the problem. The problem is, as we become a much more technologically reliant society, the number of passwords is going to go up.
Yes.
And part of the rationale for Apple's security that they have on their phone is that most security entities put on creating passwords is that they want you to create a different password because, just me as a for example, before I started using LastPass, like I said years ago, I had the same 4 or 5 passwords for the 30 or 40 sites that I was using. The problem with that becomes what we saw when Target got breached. If you've got one password for 50 sites, if someone guesses that one password, they then have access to your first
life.
50 sites, and with a little bit of social engineering, they can get the passwords to the rest of them, because we typically use the same style of password for the 5 or 10 or 20 passwords that we think up. So that is one of the reasons that the programs like LastPass are so helpful. They keep you from using
not to take this in a different direction, but the way this entire thing was handled with Apple and the FBI, and it was made so public, what happened to the old days when the FBI would have
agree
shown
with
up
you.
at Apple headquarters and went,
just
hey,
hand it
Great
them the phone.
marketing
look,
opportunity.
we've got an issue here. We need a solid.
I
Can you help
agree.
us
Is
out?
Apple-
anybody really sure that they hacked the computer? They didn't
No,
just
that's
announce
what
that
they say, yeah.
they hacked it so that Apple's stock would plunge?
I've
We don't
worked.
even know
Retaliation?
100% that it was this Israeli firm. They're basing that on contracts that were given out by the federal government.
Well, I've actually had some dealing with the folks at Celebrate, and if there's one group of people that I would think could have done exactly what they are purported to have done, it'd be that group of folks.
Well, sure,
And-
they all come out of Israeli intelligence.
And I'm pretty sure that FBI wanted to keep it under wraps and everything, but that was a great marketing opportunity for Apple to come out and say,
And
look
that's
at us,
sad.
how cool we are.
I
Yeah.
find that sad
Yeah,
because
it
it's
is.
just a matter of money.
Yeah.
Whereas when you're dealing with a
National
security
security,
situation like that, it should be handled better, and it just gives a tip to the bad guys to increase their capabilities and encryption and everything else to hide
Maybe
the
that was the
documents better.
ploy. Maybe that was the ploy.
I think Kathleen has a point, is that what happened to the good old days when the FBI turn up and, whoever's
thought that
running...
was my point.
Oh, it's your point. I beg your pardon.
Yeah.
They look alike. I see how you
very
get mixed
similar.
Scary if
Um,
we're now confused with each other.
So,
Twins.
what
We're wearing
happened
black.
to... Oh, dear. Did somebody say Guantanamo? You're listening to WednesdayNightUndressed.com, recorded partially alive at Conroy's Pub Emporium in Lawrence, Kansas. WednesdayNightUndressed.com. And in honor of the vernal equinox, Dr. Orlando will announce, instead of doing the word as he normally does, we are going to do this differently. And he is going to be talking about rebirth as he talks to us about spring fertility rites, eggs, rabbits, and vaginas, and how they were co-opted by
What
the
was that
Catholic
last word?
Church.
Vagine. So I got it here. So I'm guessing that everybody here around the table is familiar with the origins of Easter, how we just kind of took a bunch of pagan holidays and wrapped up our now Christian traditions around this notion of like
Rebirth.
finding. Yeah. Well, I mean that.
Oh, we're going to be doing ologies and osophies and things like that.
No,
No.
especially since we're running short on time, I just wanted to sort of say,
Just co-opt everything.
well, I mean, that's kind of
Why
what,
not?
if you're a smart religion, that's
Yeah.
what you do.
Absolutely.
Talk to L. Ron Hubbard. So I kind of wanted to have this discussion about rebirth. I've been doing a lot of you can't do a lot of research on it just because it's not that deep of a idea. But have you guys heard of simulation hypothesis or simulation theory?
Yeah, it's usually
of.
larger
Okay.
Duracells and
So, yes, it's where you take the size D battery that you normally. No, okay, simulation theory, like I'll put a link on the website that goes to Nick Bostrom's paper. Short version is there's a college student that came up with this idea, a trilemma. Either at least one of these three things has to be true. Either the human race is eradicated or ceases to be at some point in the future, or a post-human race exists in the future and creates a model of past times.
All right.
And hold on, I gotta look to make sure that I say the third possibility absolutely right, because if I get this wrong, the theory doesn't hold. Or they put together a model of a society that is nothing like our current society. One of those, at least one of those three things has to
You're
be true.
saying that human society, as we know it now, has to disappear
End.
entirely.
Right.
And it's either replaced by something not human at all,
Uh-huh.
or replaced by...
By something that is semi-human,
Okay.
that wants to understand what humanity was like.
All right.
Or There's replaced by something that is human that has absolutely no interest in what humans are like. The short version of this, the short end to this theory is because we have the computer capabilities of modeling things, at some point in the future, we will have the ability to model our reality as it exists right now. The notion is, if that is true, it has likely already happened, and we are living in a simulation.
Huh.
So that's
We are living in a stimulation.
well,
Simulation.
I am living in a stimulation.
You're living in a stimulation.
Maybe not everybody, but
Poor
yes,
Jeremy.
over here. So the notion is, if we are in fact an advanced society that is modeling our current society, we can make it whatever we want. We can tweak and change any aspect of reality that we find interesting.
So, Matrix.
Exactly. The Matrix was a example of simulation theory. So I wanted to ask the panel, and Jeremy sent this out ahead, but I completely get it if this was way too weird for you guys to do. I wanted to know if you could change one thing about reality as a whole. The universe is your oyster. What would you change?
About our own reality or reality in general?
About reality with a capital R. Yes. You can change it. What would you change?
Thank
gotta
goodness
think about
I
that
can
one.
do this last.
Okay, I'll start.
Well,
I'll
just
start.
one thing. Just
Well, you
one
can
thing.
change any combination of things.
It's
but
too
I
big a
could.
question.
Yeah. Jeez.
No. I
it's a
agree.
big
This
question.
is a big question.
Oh, it's
I
a big
kind of
question.
misinterpreted this at first, and I read that, if you could change one thing in the world to see how it would go, what would you do? And I would have said eliminate humans, because it's humans who are messing up the world.
Actually, that was what I was just thinking.
Yeah.
Was eliminate humans.
You
But-
guys are
Only-
I
dark.
thought that.
Yeah.
Yeah, what in
Actually,
the
I
world?
thought that too.
Suddenly, I look like the lighthearted, fun-filled one
And
in
the
the bunch.
Irish.
The negative influence
Yeah.
on the natural world.
No.
You can't just eliminate Justin Bieber, or
Yeah, no.
it has
Well,
to be
that
all
would help.
humans.
No, all humans are a cancer on the face of the universe. I will
You
get
guys,
rid of them.
I gave
we
this
have two budding supervillains
Like a
right here.
misogynist.
I gave this considerable
Happy
thought,
birthday.
actually, and
Women
I came
are
to the
supposed to
conclusion
be
that
sensitive and calm.
there are things that in the world that need not be here.
Like,
Sharks.
Sharks. That's what worries you, sharks.
I don't like sharks.
You live in
Jeremy is
Kansas.
convinced
I have never liked
You have
sharks.
sharks in Clinton
That
Lake.
explains why you're in Kansas.
Sharks?
See, now,
Haven't you ever
I
watched
would
Shark Week?
say
That's
that
fascinating.
everything in the natural world is necessary to perpetuate the natural world.
No, don't eat
but
sharks.
us.
How
see,
about
I disagree.
mosquitoes?
I think that
And
a lot
chiggers.
of people make this have this notion that somehow mankind is separate from nature.
He's not supposed to be, but I think he's made himself.
I don't think it's possible to make yourself. I don't think it's possible that
Then why do we keep destroying it?
because
Because we can? That's going to be the answer? Because
no,
we can?
my notion is not that we are destroying it because we can. We are definitely changing the form of the physical things that are around us. But just because we change the form of the physical things around us does not mean that they have been destroyed or haven't served their purpose or whatever.
Is this becoming a rap song?
It is becoming
We
a
are
rant.
changing the whole climate of this world.
Yeah, but the climate existed before us and it's going to exist after us.
Well, we may be.
We are not
may
eliminating
be-
the climate.
We
No,
may
I-
be fulfilling the goal of eliminating humans all by ourselves.
yes.
Yeah.
If we keep going the way we're going. we
Final
will.
word from our new guest.
Well, I mean, if elimination of human beings could occur, but the Earth and life on Earth has survived gigantic meteor impacts and everything else, and I think that the Earth will survive humans. It might take millions of years to recover from it, but if it goes that way. But the one thing I would like to eliminate from reality is parking meters, because they really tick me off when I get tickets.
Yeah.
So I'm going to start small and work my way up.
Okay.
You've been listening to WednesdayNightUndressed.com, recorded partially alive at Conroy's Pub and Emporium in Lawrence, Kansas. WednesdayNightUndressed.com. We'd like to thank our team for tonight. Of course, Dr. Orlando, Kathleen Taylor, Ivo Ivanov, and of course our guests for this evening, Donna Kane-Swan, and Mr. Kenneth Hayes. We'd like to also make a point of thanking our sound and editing team, Neil Rasmussen, who can't spell his name properly, and Eric Holcomb, my own personal, very wonderful, dear friend and producer, who...
Why don't you guys just spoon and get it over with?
Yeah, well, you know. And of course, we'd like to thank Tom Conroy, of course, for letting us do this every week. You must try his steak fries, and for running probably the coolest proper pub in the region. From me, your host, Jeremy Taylor, I must tell you that you're rather naughty for listening, but we will see you next time here on Wednesday Night Undressed.com.
Hey!